The drums of war have never beat so clearly. And it's not so much the drums of war internationally that I'm thinking of as the drums of war in Whitehall, where Healey, the defence minister, can talk not so much about an aim or a proposal or a negotiation, but a prediction. It's as if he is delivering a dose of realism to Rachel Reeves, all those R's. This is not something that is up for debate. And this curious phrasing by the Defence Secretary, we're witnessing a masterclass in pre-spending rhetoric, a manoeuvre of political language not unlike that of a man promising a grand wedding before consulting the bank manager. Healey has declared with supreme confidence that the United Kingdom will spend 3% of GDP on defence by 2034. No doubt, he says, not if, not subject to fiscal conditions, not even the previously cautious ambition. No, a certain decade of rising defence spending. But is this a promise or is this a forecast dressed in uniform? At first glance, it seems like a bold commitment, one that would please Washington and more precisely President Trump, who's been hounding NATO partners to cough up more of their GDP for guns and generals. But scratch the surface and what emerges is not an actual commitment, but a politically expedient prophecy. And examining the language, the phrase "no doubt" is not the same as "we guarantee." It invites confidence without legal or fiscal responsibility. It is, in short, the linguistic equivalent of nodding vigorously while crossing one's fingers behind the back. But when a government source has to clarify that Healey was merely expressing an opinion, the whole edifice of certainty begins to wobble a little. It's as if the Ministry of Defence is writing cheques with adjectives that the Treasury has yet to sign off. This is not so much a negotiation with the Treasury as a pressure tactic, not consensus, but diktat. And the timing is no coincidence. As Rachel Reeves approaches the precipice of her first comprehensive spending review, the Ministry of Defence is attempting to preempt austerity logic by embedding assumptions into the Strategic Defence Review. An SDR that we now hear is built on the expectation that 3% will be reached. In other words, if you don't approve this level of spending, the entire 10-year plan collapses. It's a classic civil service ploy. Write your own budgetary outcome into the operational logic of a strategic plan and force the Chancellor's hand. It's easier to authorise funding than to rewrite the whole review. So, why this matters? Now, 3 critical points here. Firstly, this is an act of rhetorical bravado. Healey is trying to make 3% feel inevitable before it's been funded, debated or agreed, and in doing so, he shifts the burden of responsibility onto Reeves, onto the Treasury. If she doesn't fund the plan, she will be blamed for undermining Britain's security. Secondly, the Treasury is likely to resist, and Reeves has already raided the international aid budget to fund the rise to 2.5%. This extra leap to 3% would require an additional £17.3 billion in a single year by the end of the decade. And according to the Office of Budget Responsibility, that is not small change. It's the equivalent of 2 university sectors or a complete overhaul of adult social care. Thirdly, Healey's move risks igniting cross-departmental animosity. Other ministries, housing, local government, education, are still scrambling in negotiations, and Healey's language, therefore, represents not just ambition but a tactical ambush on the spending process. It's worth noting that Britain currently spends 2.3% of GDP on defence, already above the NATO minimum. And the idea that this is somehow inadequate is driven less by strategic necessity than by political theatre, particularly that of Mr. Trump. I think it's also driven by the fact that we simply aren't in a position to respond to the demands made of us, and our country is vulnerable. NATO may well raise its collective eyebrow to a 3.5% or even a 5% target, but this must be understood for what it is, symbolic muscle flexing. And meanwhile, British troops live in a housing described by MPs as unfit for human habitation, and the MOD has failed repeatedly to meet recruitment and retention goals. You can pledge all the GDP you like, but if it isn't reaching the front line or fixing the mould in army houses, it's not defence, it's optics. So what's John Healey actually doing? In a sense, He's playing the game that all ministers must play, projecting certainty while avoiding accountability. But the language he's used, no doubt, certain decade, we will spend, is not just hopeful, it's potentially misleading. It sounds like commitment, but it is in fact a highly strategic, if slightly slippery, prediction. We shouldn't be distracted by the boldness of the phrasing. The real question is this: where is the money coming from? And when push comes to shove, will Rachel Reeves foot the bill or call his bluff? That, in truth, is the only defence review that matters.